In July of 1891, a mysterious Englishman walked into the most glamorous casino in the world. He was not royalty, he was not a millionaire, and he was definitely not welcome for long. His name was Charles de Ville Wells. And within days, he would do something so unbelievable that newspapers, gamblers, and casino bosses across Europe could not stop talking about it. He walked into the Casino de Monte-Carlo, sat down at the roulette table, and broke the bank. Not once, not twice, but over and over again. The casino had to stop the game, cover the table, and bring in more money. The question is, was Charles Wells the luckiest gambler alive? Or did he know something the casino didn't? Welcome to Top 10 Official. Today, we're telling the story of the man who became known as the man who broke the bank at Monte Carlo. Part 1. The casino that built a country. Before we talk about Charles Wells, you need to understand the stage. Monte Carlo was not just a casino, it was a palace of temptation. Gold ceilings, crystal chandeliers, velvet rooms, millionaires, aristocrats, con artists, and dreamers from every corner of Europe. The Casino de Monte-Carlo had become one of the most famous gambling houses on earth, and by 1891, it had a reputation. People came there to win fortunes. Most left with nothing. The roulette wheel was the star of the show. Red or black, odd or even, high or low. One number, one spin, one chance to change your life. But the house always had the edge. That was the rule. At least it was supposed to be. Part 2. Enter Charles de Ville Wells. Charles de Ville Wells was not the kind of man casino owners trusted. He was charming, intelligent, confident, but he also had a history of questionable business dealings. Some called him an inventor. Some called him a gambler. Others called him what he really may have been, a fraudster. Before Monte Carlo, Wells had been involved in investment schemes and questionable ventures. He knew how to persuade people. He knew how to sell confidence. And in the gambling world, confidence can be just as dangerous as money. When Wells arrived in Monte Carlo in July 1891, he did not look like a man about to make history, but he had cash, he had nerve, and he had a plan. Or at least, that is what everyone later wondered. Part 3. The first spins. Wells sat at the roulette table. The croupier spun the wheel. The ball clicked across the numbers. Then it dropped. Wells won. Nothing strange yet. Gamblers win all the time. Then he won again, and again, and again. The people around the table started watching. At first, maybe they laughed. Another lucky tourist. But then the laughter faded. Because Charles Wells was not just winning. He was winning too often. The casino staff began paying closer attention. The other gamblers leaned in. The room got quieter. Every spin felt heavier than the last. And then came the moment Monte Carlo feared most. The table ran out of money. Charles Wells had broken the bank. Part 4. What breaking the bank really meant now. This is important. When people hear he broke the bank, they imagine the entire casino went bankrupt. That is not what happened. In Monte Carlo, each roulette table had a set amount of chips available. If a player won more than that table had in reserve, the game stopped. The casino covered the table, brought in more chips, and reset the game. That was called breaking the bank. It was rare, it was dramatic, and it was embarrassing for the casino. Because every time it happened, everyone in the room knew, for that moment, the gambler had beaten the house, and Charles Wells was not finished. Part 5. The streak that made him famous. Reports from the time say Wells won extraordinary amounts during that July visit. One famous version of the story says he won 23 times in 30 roulette spins. Think about that. A roulette table is designed to take your money slowly. But Wells was doing the opposite. He was pulling money out of the casino so fast that the staff could barely keep up. People gathered behind him. Whispers spread through the room. Who is this man? What system is he using? Is the wheel biased? Is he cheating? Or is this simply the wildest run of luck Monte Carlo has ever seen? By the end of his first major run, Wells reportedly walked away with around 1 million francs. In 1891, that was an outrageous fortune. This was not just a good night. This was a story. And stories travel fast. Part 6. The Mystery. Luck, system, or scam. Here is where the story becomes fascinating. Nobody knows exactly how Charles Wells did it. Some believed he had discovered a system. Some thought he was exploiting biased roulette wheels. Back then, roulette wheels were mechanical, and if a wheel had a tiny defect, certain numbers might appear more often than they should. Other people believed Wells was simply betting aggressively during an impossible lucky streak. And some thought the whole thing was connected to fraud, not necessarily at the table, but in how he got the money to gamble in the first place. That may be the darkest part of the story. Wells was not a clean hero. He was not a genius mathematician like the MIT blackjack team. He was a complicated man with a shadowy past. And maybe that is why the legend survived. Because nobody could decide what he really was. A genius, a cheat, a lucky fool, or all three. Part 7. Monte Carlo could not ignore him. Imagine being a casino boss in 1891. Your entire business is built on one idea: the house always wins. Then one man walks in and publicly beats your table again and again. The casino did not just lose money, it lost control of the room. That is what made Wells dangerous. Casinos can survive losses. They cannot survive the appearance that someone has solved the game. Because if people believe roulette can be beaten, everyone wants to try. And that is exactly what happened. The legend of Charles Wells spread beyond Monaco. Newspapers picked it up. Gamblers repeated it. Songwriters turned it into entertainment. Soon, Charles Wells was not just a man. He was a character, a symbol. The man who walked into Monte Carlo and made the casino blink first. Part 8. The song that made him immortal. Later in 1891, a music hall song appeared called "The Man Who Broke the Bank at Monte Carlo." That song made the story even bigger. It turned Wells from a gambling rumor into popular culture. People who had never been to Monaco knew the phrase. They imagined the man walking through Europe with pockets full of casino money. Confident, elegant, untouchable. But the song also helped create a myth, because the real Charles Wells was not just a glamorous winner. He was a man who kept chasing money, attention, and risk. And like many gamblers, his story did not end at the top. Part 9. The Return. After his July success, most people would have disappeared. Take the money, live quietly, never tempt fate again. But Charles Wells was not most people. He returned to Monte Carlo later in 1891. This time, the legend says he arrived with even more style, including a yacht and a beautiful woman by his side. And unbelievably, he won again. Once more, Wells took huge sums from the casino. Once more, Monte Carlo had to face the question, how is he doing this? By now, Wells had become the kind of gambler casinos fear most, not because he always wins, but because he makes everyone else believe they can win too. Part 10. The Fall of Charles Wells. But legends often hide ugly truths. Charles Wells may have beaten the casino, but he could not outrun his own life. After Monte Carlo, his reputation became tangled with fraud, failed schemes, and criminal accusations. The public loved the image of the charming gambler who beat the system. But behind that image was a man who had reportedly taken money from investors and used questionable methods to fund his lifestyle and gambling. That is what makes this story so powerful. Charles Wells was not a simple hero. He was not a simple villain. He was a man who stepped into the brightest casino in Europe, won a fortune, became famous, and then became a warning. Because sometimes beating the house is not the same as winning at life. The end of a gambler. So what really happened in July 1891? Was Charles de Ville Wells a mathematical genius, a roulette expert, a fraudster with stolen money, or just the luckiest man to ever sit at a Monte Carlo table? More than 130 years later, nobody knows for sure. But one thing is certain. For a few unforgettable days, inside the most glamorous casino in the world, Charles Wells did the impossible. He made the house lose. He made Monte Carlo nervous. And he turned one roulette table into a legend. This was the story of Charles de Ville Wells, the man who broke the bank at Monte Carlo. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Top 10 Official for more unbelievable stories, mysteries, and countdowns from around the world. And tell us in the comments, do you think Charles Wells was lucky? Or did he know exactly what he was doing?